Hi, everyone, and welcome to Association Amplified Live. Quick question for everyone here. How many AMS systems has your organization been through? Two, three, maybe more? I'm joined by Jeff Horne today, and we're going to be digging into why you might be having trouble finding a system that actually works. We'll talk about the traditional AMS model, when it makes sense and when it doesn't, and what an alternative actually looks like. Drop your questions in the chat, and as we go through, we'll get to them towards the end. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Marcus. Happy to be here.
So, Jeff, you work with associations at all different stages of maturity. When conversations turn to technology, how often do you hear some version of, we're probably due for another AMS? And what's usually going on beneath that statement?
Yeah, great question. We certainly hear it a lot. I'm sure a lot of folks in the world of associations hear that a lot. That it's time for a new AMS. We've kind of outlived our current platform, and I think at the root of that, often, as an association, as an organization, often what's really happened is that you've evolved as an organization, and most likely have outgrown the system in one way or another, and often that's that your members are just expecting a better experience, and they're not getting it. Staff are frustrated. And what we see really commonly is that you're using the AMS just for a lot less things than when you first got started.
Yeah, I get that sentiment. Would you think that the AMS is really designed in a way that people are really getting the most out of? Like, what do you typically see in your work? That is there a percentage of kind of what they're paying for is not really being utilized? Is it relevant? Where does that friction kind of come in when it comes to these associations, and when they arrive to that place where they think that they need that new AMS system? What do you think is the main motivator?
Yeah, I think what we see is that it's 2026, and there's a lot of great software out there for associations. So if you think of a typical association that has a lot of different departments or people focused on specific areas across education and learning, marketing, communications, of course, membership, advocacy, all these different areas, typically with those staff at those organizations, they want to use the best tools to be able to get their job done, to engage best with their member, to do their job most efficiently. So what we see, what the trend has been for quite a few years now, is associations embracing other software tools, right? So you just go find the best tool that's going to meet your needs for the work you're doing at the association, often because the module in the AMS that's been built to give you that, it's just not robust enough, right? It's just typically not giving you what you need. And that's just the nature of the AMS model, right? It's like it's a large, what we call monolithic software solution that's full of modules, that's trying to do everything for an association, but it's hard, right? It's hard for one software to do everything as well. So it's just kind of natural to start to reach out. And so a question we often ask folks is, well, if we turned your AMS off tomorrow, what would really happen? Like, what are the things you would no longer be able to do? And that's where the focus needs to be as you go on this journey of, okay, what's next? Do I need another AMS, or should I be thinking differently?
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense, right? There's all sorts of different products out there that are really specialized in any one of the key areas that an AMS is really trying to be excellent at the same time. And can any one provider of software be able to really provide a top tier experience? Is there a practical example that maybe you could share with folks? Like maybe a low hanging fruit one would be something applicable to marketing, where something off the shelf just far exceeds what would be in the AMS, and perhaps that's why they were dissatisfied with the AMS and thought they needed another AMS.
Yeah, for sure. I think the marketing team at associations, they're often a driver for change, right? Because people working in that realm, they want the right tools to do their job. So it's a perfect example, right? Where if you look at an AMS, probably has some form of email module, right? That's built to be able to send broadcast emails out. But when you compare that, like marketing communication software, it's a whole industry, right? So what you commonly see is marketing folks wanting to use HubSpot or Marketo or MailChimp or Constant Contact. And there's a whole realm there, right? And people kind of have their favorite tools, and those tools are very robust, right? They really just give you a lot of flexibility. So that's a great example, right? Where the module in the AMS typically isn't going to be doing it. So if you're looking to solve for that problem and you're looking for that in an AMS, that's probably not the right approach, right? The right approach is to empower your marketing team to go find the right tool. And then it comes down to integration. And that's a whole other discussion, Marcus, just around integrations, because what we see traditionally is, especially some of the legacy AMSs, integration is not as easy as it could be, right? And so, one of the problems that we commonly see is just as staff are going out and starting to adopt new tools, maybe some of them are integrated back to the AMS or that system of truth. Some of them might not be, and then this opens up a whole other problem of, can you really understand your member and understand how they're engaging with you if you can't see a full picture? And it's probably creating a lot of friction for staff because they're exporting data out of one system, importing it into another just so they can get their job done.
What do you think the allure is of using an AMS system? Is it really just about the promise that this is something tailored to the buyer, opposed to actually putting together the suite that you actually need? Why would it be that people are focused on just finding the AMS and jumping from one to another?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I do think at its core is that goal of the perceived simplicity of, if I can just have it all in one, it's one vendor. If there's a problem, I just have to get in touch with that one vendor. And often it can be the finance department as well. If everything's happening in that one system, we can reconcile our finances more easily in that one system as well. So often it's the desire to make things as efficient as possible for staff, often at the expense of member experience, and often at the expense of really just the overall experience for staff, because those modules aren't going to be as robust. So I think that there's a perception that should be challenged that, if I have a bunch of separate tools, it's actually going to be more work, it's going to be more complex. That can be flipped around to say, by empowering your staff to use the tools they want to use more flexible tools, you're actually simplifying their world and most likely providing a better member experience as well.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. If often where people find a lot of friction with their AMS is that just any one given component, maybe the module that they most rely on, just does not have the feature set for them. Is the answer actually to go and find another AMS that is somehow going to meet the best in class for that type of module? So Jeff, just to linger on this a little longer, if an all-in-one AMS isn't the right answer for many associations, what is? When you talk about best of breed or ecosystem approach, what does that actually mean in practice, not in theory?
Yeah, great question. And I think it's a newer concept for a lot of associations. Really, when we think about this idea that we talk about a lot at Wicked, is this idea of an AMS-less ecosystem. We really believe associations don't need the traditional AMS. We really believe that the core of your technology approach and roadmap in associations should be grounded on flexibility and choice, especially when living in the world we're living in today with the advancements happening in technology. You want to be nimble and flexible. And the traditional AMS is not that. It's really not a nimble and flexible system. It's a larger monolithic system that is slower to adapt, is slower to move. So what does it look like to not have an AMS? And this is a topic we're pretty passionate about at Wicked. There's a few core components you need. Number one is you need what we'd call a system of record for your data. So when I say for your data, for an association, that means your membership data, but really you could extend that to be all the people, all the organizations, all the groups, like, that core rich data of all the people you interact with. You need a place to call that home, right? So you need that core database that's going to be a system of record. At Wicked, for us, that's what we call our member data platform. So the MDP really becomes that hub. It feels like a CRM. It's a way to kind of think about it, but it's really built to store and connect. And that system, whatever system you use for that system of record, has to be laser focused on integration. Because whether you're fully embracing an AMS-less ecosystem or not, integration needs to be front of mind as you evaluate other software tools as you think, because it's not enough to just ask the question of, oh, do you have an API? Can you integrate? That's the easy question for vendors to answer. It's the more detailed questions of what type of API, how do you integrate? Is your API open? What standards does it follow? So there's a whole other layer there. And this is a topic we talk a lot about, the importance of that core system being integration friendly. So that's the first piece. The second piece, of course, is how do you do commerce? How do you do web and e-commerce and provide a member portal experience and a place to transact membership dues and maybe events and maybe sell all the different products you want to sell? And so that's the other key component. At Wicket, we're really big believers in a platform called WooCommerce. It's one of the leading e-commerce engines in the world. And we integrate really deeply with that to provide a full portal and commerce experience to our customers. But again, it can be any modern commerce or web platform, right? And so those two pieces working together really lay the foundation when integrated with your financial management software. And that's kind of the third pillar of a successful ecosystem, is having modern financial software. And that is typically, an organization, you've gone to cloud-based accounting software, Sage Intacct, QuickBooks Online, NetSuite, whatever it might be. And we're able to then connect and integrate with that system as well. So those are kind of the foundations. And then it's about, surrounding that base with an ecosystem of tools, right? Like, what are the right tools? Because now you really have the ultimate flexibility, and that's what we really want. Be able to swap pieces in and out of your ecosystem and really give you that flexibility as your staff changes, as your organization evolves, as the mandate of your organization evolves, and you're trying to implement new strategies. It's empowering you with flexibility.
Yeah, is a good analogy here is that if you really get the core, a good core, which is that data component to it, and separating that out from the actual features of like how you segment, how you email, those different modules that you would find inside of a AMS, but you kind of strip out that core data set for functionality. It allows the association to be more flexible and agile with, individual tools that maybe they lean on more from association to association. It allows them to kind of mix and match and build that solution without having to go down the rabbit hole of fully custom software.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, a key part there is thinking about those integrations and how the systems connect. Like in our world, we want to connect the member data platform with all the other tools that are being used, because we want to share data with those systems, right? We want the email marketing system to have the data it needs. We want the learning management system to have the data it needs. And you don't share all data, right? That's unrealistic. You're being really smart and strategic about what data does that system need to allow it to do its job to best serve our members and our staff, right? And so you're starting to think through that way in terms of what data to share and how integrations will be facilitated. So it becomes really important. But you also ideally want that system of record to be able to track the key touch points of your members, right? And this is something we do at Wicket with our member data platform, is that as we integrate to that ecosystem, we're also recording touch points on the user's record. So it allows our customer to see, that full 360-degree view, a true 360-degree view of how their member is interacting, because it's not just within what the AMS knows, it's looking at the entire ecosystem and empowering our customer to use that data. So I think it's really important, that system of record. There's a few core things, like you were saying, that's really important for it to be able to do, and then to reach out, connect, and share with your ecosystem of tools.
Yeah, I could definitely see the advantage of having a more robust system of record, right? Because then that allows you to not best one not be boxed into any feature set, but then also allow you to adapt in terms of what you want to respond to based off what you see inside of the data. Like maybe there is something that you don't have in terms of a solution that you're seeing in the data that now you've identified that, hey, we need to leverage this new information that we're getting out of this, right? And if it doesn't work, maybe 2 years down the line, you can switch tools without having to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You still have all that data working competently for you.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
Yeah.
so with so when it comes to a traditional AMS, when does it still make sense? And what are the signs that our organization has outgrown that traditional typical AMS model? Where do you find that line is?
Yeah, like I think that for us, what we see is that the traditional AMS certainly has a place in smaller organizations. I think if you can imagine an organization that maybe has 5 or 6 staff and one person's doing membership and marketing communications and maybe something else as well, you can see that, you know, having those functions in one system because one person's doing all those same functions is probably going to make sense, right? And as a smaller organization, you know, some of there's specific AMSs that are targeted at smaller groups, and they're probably going to come at a lower cost. The trade-off is they're going to be very rigid, right? So
Mhm.
you're going to have to use them the way they were built to be used, and you're probably going to have to adapt some of your processes because as as smaller organization using especially lower cost software tools, really what the lower cost is implying is you're going to go through a very, very structured process to implement them. You're going to probably be a little bit hands-on yourself, and there's not going to be a ton of flexibility. And then as you kind of work your way up to larger systems and solutions like Wickets, is the power is then the flexibility that you're getting. So I think for groups that are smaller, I think there's a place for the traditional AMS for sure. A key question we ask folks whenever we're talking to somebody is, well, just name the things you're using your AMS for.
Mm.
And if someone's come to us and they list like 8 things that they use their AMS for, that's probably not somebody who's ready for a solution of going AMS-less, because now you have to probably adopt maybe 5 or 6 tools. And that's a pretty significant undertaking.
Mm.
So what we do find is as you kind of get up to organizations that maybe have 10, 12, 15 plus staff, and as you get into larger groups, odds are the list of what they're using their AMS for is down to probably 3 things. And that's where you can start to really question, do I need this big monolithic software that's really big and heavy and probably really, really expensive? Or could I get into a more nimble and flexible type of solution? So I think that's kind of the key. And I think if there's not a lot of complex integration needs and whatnot, I think, again, that's where the traditional AMS certainly still has its place.
Jeff, could you share like a kind of a practical example, perhaps folks that you've worked with, and just kind of explain out that before and after of
Mhm.
what exactly it looked like to go AMS-less?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's, of course, yeah, we work with a lot of great associations, including ASAE as well. We've recently rolled out onto our platforms, and so I think like it's really interesting. It depends on what they're coming from as well, right? Sometimes folks are coming from a bespoke custom system that was built,
Mm.
specifically to meet their needs, but has really, really aged. Or
Mm.
sometimes you'll have folks that are on an AMS that's been really customized and really tailored to meet their needs. So what we commonly see is that a lot of times staff they're struggling to answer simple questions. Like,
Mm.
how many members do I have? We think
Mm.
that's such a simple question, but for so many associations, it's really hard to answer because they just can't get enough clarity out of the data and the way the data
Mm.
is stored in their systems. So one of our goals always is to give really high level of access and clarity of your data and really be able to see it and understand it with that clarity, just by making it easier for staff to see, manipulate the data, maybe pull reports on that data. I think the other thing is really, it's about, for us, it's usually about empowerment, right? Like we might be saying, the education team at an association may be used to working within the module of the AMS, and it's pretty restrictive for them, where through a transformation, they might have had the opportunity to actually go meet vendors and select the best vendor to manage, let's say, their certification program, which in itself can be extremely complex, right? And there's purpose-built software to meet those needs. So those staff are really typically really being empowered with that flexibility to use the tool they want to use. And then, of course, the key comes down to integration and flexibility, making sure the systems are all working together, because we need to also ensure the member experience is consistent across some different tools that a member may now be using and interacting with.
Jeff, you gave a really good practical question for folks to ask themselves: just how many members do you have? Do you have any other advice for folks that are kind of taking a consideration to this approach, which goes against maybe some status quo that's out there in terms of thinking about software and how to approach those different needs for different departments and for the association as a whole? What would be your advice for leaders that are looking to bring this up internally and really challenge those decisions, as well as vetting vendors and other technology providers when they're looking to make improvements in terms of their operations?
Yeah, no, good stuff, Marcus. Yeah, I think a few thoughts on that. I think that a really important question for leaders to ask within their organization. I just love the question of, if we turned our AMS off tomorrow, what would happen? Like, what would happen at our organization? Where would the fires be? I think it's just an interesting thing to think about, because a lot of folks are also on very customized versions of an AMS, and there's fragility with that, right? And there's a level of risk with that as well. So I think just having a really good handle as a leader on what is my AMS actually being used for, I think is just a really good starting point, because it just really helps to answer the question of, well, like, what are those things that I'm using it for? And then, because you can really then look at the return on investment, right? We're paying X amount for this system that has 25 modules in it, and we're using 3. You probably want to start questioning that as a leader, to make sure you're actually getting return on your investment. And so it probably will start to spark some interesting discussions. I think another thing that every association needs to be considering right now is the impact of AI, right? AI is the hot topic right now, and AI is really going to impact the world of association software in a pretty significant way. But where we sit today, nobody has a crystal ball to understand what that's going to look like, right? What we know is AI makes it easier to build software. You could ask yourself a wild question like, could I just use AI to build my own AMS? Pretty crazy to even think of something like that, and I wouldn't recommend it. But those are the types of questions that you could be asking yourself, right? So the world of software, like, we're at a point where software over the next 5 years is going to change dramatically, which for me, what's most important for associations there is coming back to that question of flexibility. If you know things are going to change, you want to position yourself to have choice and flexibility and not have over lock-in with any vendor, right? So I think that's just really important, as you look at where you're going as an organization and asking, do I lock into another big AMS? I'd really be questioning and asking myself about, is it going to give me the flexibility I need? To kind of answer your other question that you raised there, Marcus, in terms of looking at vendors, I do think it's just absolutely critical to be talking about integrations, and to be talking about integrations beyond who do you integrate with? Do you have an API? Like, those are too easy for vendors to answer. There's another layer. We actually have a whole guide on integrations that we provide to folks, but you need to get deeper, right? And it requires maybe getting just a little bit technical, but you can just ask a couple of questions like, what framework is your API based on? Can you send me a link to your API documentation? That's a great one. but a
Mhm.
lot of vendors can't, and that's a huge red flag. If you can't just be provided a link to the documentation, it probably means it's not truly an open API. It maybe means it's going to be custom built just for your needs, and those are not places you want to be, because really now you're getting into custom software at the end of the day. So anyway, I could probably keep ranting a bit on this topic, but those are my thoughts.
No, I think that's very practical advice, and we'll make sure following the show that we'll actually link out to that guide that Jeff was mentioning. I think that's very useful advice for folks. We're nearing the end of the show now. Jeff, how would you like to take some questions from the audience?
Yeah, absolutely, love to.
Okay, our first question here is, how does Wicket showcase reports? Do you integrate with a platform like Power BI?
Oh, great question. Yeah. So we actually provide a reporting solution within the member data platform. So we actually have a reporting component that we use. It's actually a very powerful system. We actually embed a third-party reporting engine into our system. So we provide that, and it provides really robust reporting. And because we get this really true 360-degree view of members and behaviors, it's very capable. However, we do have customers that are like, hey, no, I've got my own BI software. Maybe they've got their own data warehouse, even if they're more sophisticated, and they just want our data. So then they can use their own tool, and we can provide that as well. Just a pipeline of our data so that it can be integrated with other BI analytics software as well. Great question.
Here's an interesting one. From a member's view, what's the first sign our systems aren't working well together? And when we spot those signs, how do we figure out what needs to change first?
Mm. Yeah, that's a really good one. A lot of folks probably know Reggie Henry, who's the Chief Information and Performance Excellence Officer at ASA, and Reggie tells a classic story of talking to a member, and that member saying like, hey, you ASA, you should know me by now,
Mm.
but every time I go to a different system, I have to re-enter my information. And so, like, why don't you know me? And that's, I think that's like the number one indicator, right? If your member has to go to your LMS or to your community or whatever it is, and has to continually re-enter information, basically keep providing you the same information over and over again, that's just a huge flaw and a huge red flag. That means your systems are not properly integrated and aren't sharing the right data. They might be integrated, but maybe they're just not sharing the right data. So there's a few things there, right? You want the login process across systems to be really smooth for your members, right? They should never have to re-enter login information. You want single sign-on across your systems. You want to make sure the right data is there. And I think those lay the foundation for a better member experience. And those are a couple of things I'd probably be listening for right at the gate.
I think that's a great place for us to wrap up. A great example from Reggie. So, Jeff, as we wrap up here, is there any one thing that you'd like to leave the audience with?
Yeah, I think for us at Wicket, we're big promoters of this idea of living in an AMS-less world, right? Like, I think that technology's really advanced a lot over the past couple of decades. We live in a different world we did when the concept of the AMS was born, but I think that the concept of the AMS hasn't changed a lot over all of those years. And so I think, our goal is for people organizations to have an opportunity to at least look at a different way of thinking. And hopefully this discussion helps folks to realize there is a different way to approach technology.
Fantastic. Well, that's all the time that we have for today. I want to thank you all for showing up to the show. Jeff, thank you for coming, and we'll see you all next time on Association Amplified Live.